Wait. Before you roll your eyes and say, oh, another history lesson, trust me, this is more like a cool origin story that will make you appreciate your beloved games even more. Please don't go!
Never mind.
In fact, if you ever immerse yourself in the world of Half-Life, Metro, Fortnite or Far Cry, you owe a debt of gratitude to Quake 2. This is a story of how that classic set the stage for some of your all-time favorites. Welcome beautiful people, and today we are gonna be talking about Quake 2.
The rest of humanity wish them luck and Godspeed as well.
I feel like we have to make a small detour first and talk about Quake franchise as a whole and Quake 1 in particular here. Quake 1 was developed by ID Software and released in June 1996. It mostly builds upon the success and gameplay of another most known, most respected and most renowned ID Software game, Doom. One thing that distinguishes Doom from Quake 1 is true 3D graphics, which was a breakthrough. It also set new FPS genre standard for the long years to come. Quake 1 is a gothic horror shooter with a single-player campaign, but its single-player campaign it's not what we used to have now. I would say the main feature of Quake 1 was its multiplayer. It was one of the first online competitive FPS games out there, and it definitely built a foundation for a lot of esports to follow. Now, moving on to Quake 2. ID Software made a pivot regarding Quake 2 settings, moving from Lovecraftian horror to dystopian sci-fi, militaristic and technological take on things. For the most part, Quake 2 was built on the foundation of the first installment in series, improving its single-player campaign, its technology behind the game, and its multiplayer. I'd like to focus on one thing that pretty much revolutionized FPS genre forever, and it is storytelling. Quake 1 had a single player campaign, but it was just a collection of levels, with some enemies and puzzles, but not as much as story behind them. Basically, near to zero FPS games had a single player mode with story-driven campaign that we used to have nowadays. You can pretty much count FPS games before Quake 2 with narrative-driven design with the fingers on one hand. We had Doom, released in 1993, which story wasn't particularly deep, but it established a way to go for future ID Software games. We had System Shock, released in 1994, which had a complex storyline, but I wouldn't go as far as calling it an FPS game. It's kinda RPG with shooting elements, right? We had Marathon, developed by Bungie and released in 1994, which remake, by the way, we should get next year. We had Dark Forces, released in 1995, with a pretty complex storyline around Star Wars saga. And we had Heretic and Hexen, released in 1994 and 1995 respectively, which were pretty similar to Doom gameplay-wise, but with a little more story elements. All these games, and in my opinion, our feature game today, Quake 2 as their leader, revolutionized and changed FPS genre forever. They showed us that FPS games can have engaging and captivating story. They showed us that FPS games can have immersive worlds. They showed us that there could be much more than just run and gun. Fun fact, Quake 2 is considered by many players to be the worst installment in the Quake series. Why? I bet it's not because of its storyline. Yeah, and to sum it up, this revolution built a foundation for a lot of great story-driven FPS games and series, such as Half-Life, which is my favorite game series of all time, Crysis, Far Cry, rebooted Wolfenstein, and many others. Okay, now let's move from gaming history to more of a hands-on experience. I've never played Quake 1 or Quake 2 when I was a kid. I was more of a Doom and later Half-Life type of guy. Later I played a lot of Quake 3 Arena in internet cafes and LAN parties, but I've never asked myself, if there is Quake 3, maybe there is Quake 1 and 2? I've never asked myself this question for some reason. And so, I've recently heard the news that everyone who owns Quake 2 on Steam will have a free re-release / remaster added to their library. Of course I had it in my library because I am, like all of us gamers, have hundreds of games in Steam which I've never booted up. So I started the game and the first thing that blew me away from the get-go was the soundtrack, man. It is so good! It was so good that I forgot that I'm here to play the game. And I thought to myself, like, wait, so they took the inspiration from Doom 2016 and decided to create a new metal-like soundtrack for this re-release? Yeah, silly me. I thought that this kind of music couldn't be written 25 plus years ago, but guess what? It was written 25 plus years ago by Sasha Dikisian, also known as Sonic Mayhem in gaming community. Check out the list of the game soundtrack he's worked on, by the way. It's pretty impressive. So I've decided to dig a little deeper and found out that with the re-release of Quake 2, we will also get a release of Quake 2 soundtrack on vinyl. You can order it from a Laced Records website. I'll leave the link in the description below. Also, I think it's worth mentioning that Sonic Mayhem had to sign off his rights to this soundtrack to Bethesda for this vinyl to happen. As you can see on the screenshot, Sasha pretty much documented the whole vinyl soundtrack storyline in the YouTube comments. So after he signed off his rights and after some classic Bethesda soundtrack action, we finally can get our hands on vinyl soundtrack in January next year. But I think it's important to mention that its original author will not get a penny out of this release. Do with that information what you want, but if you're gonna to purchase this soundtrack for yourself, I encourage you to at least send a thank you message to Sonic Mayhem on Twitter for his outstanding work. Now, back to the game, I guess. So, I'm gonna talk mostly about the game itself rather than technical quality of the remaster, which is superb, by the way. So, if you're interested in technical side of things, I suggest you head to the Digital Foundry channel and check out their video about remaster technical quality after watching this video. Now, for those who want to hear some details about the game itself. You are taking the role of the Marine by the name Bitterman during the invasion to Stroke, which is an alien race who tried to invade Earth earlier, home planet to take fighting to their territory. During the invasion, you miss the LZ due to someone colliding with you on the orbit. Your squad lands into a trap, gets captured, tortured, and converted into pretty horrifying cyborgs. I'll be honest with you, this body horror take shook me a little. Your squad mates really went insane. They screaming for help. They knocked their heads on the walls. Looking at it made me feel something disgusting and terrifying. I even killed some of them, just to end their suffering. Sound design plays a huge part in creating this feeling. Just listen to those screams.
It hurts. Make it stop.
So you've landed somewhere off-site, you pushing through Stroke City, reconnecting to communication systems, destroying some strategic Stroke objects, and in the end fighting their leader. You're fighting their leader with quad damage and BFG. So, I'll just go with a quick conclusion on the game. If you played it when you were younger, it's 100% must play, an absolute banger for you. If you haven't, it's a 50-50% chance that it will not click with you just due to the time that has passed since original release of the game. Gameplay itself aged a little, not poorly, but still aged. If you have it in your Steam/GOG or any other library, just download it and check it out because it's classic and music slaps really hard. There are also several things that will definitely stay with you after you play for some time. I can 100% guarantee that the word trespasser will obtain a new meaning for you.
Trespasser!
Now, let's discuss some game design decisions a little. First, level design is on point. Most of the levels are very self-descriptive. I almost never got lost and completed all of the objectives without any issues. Mostly due to the fact that I didn't know how to check my objectives, just press forward and it worked out. But I should mention that some of the levels later in the game have pretty confusing layout. This is where a compass, a new feature from the remaster, comes in handy. At first I felt like it's a feature for zoomers who can't play the game like their grandpas did. But then I've decided that I'm here to get the enjoyment out of the game and use that damn compass. Another zoomer addition to the game is weapons and consumables wheels. I mean, weapon wheel is not that necessary unless you don't want to remember which weapon goes to which number on the keyboard, or if you don't want to press 7, 8, 9, 0 all the time in the end game, which I did for some reason, and now, talking about it, I feel stupid that I did. I wish I used that weapons wheel, to be honest. It would save me a lot of time. It even slows time when you use weapons wheel, so you can be not that scary for your life while swapping your weapons. Consumables wheel, though, is my personal MVP of remaster features. I'm not sure how it was in the original game, but I can easily see how things like an environmental suit and breathing mask can easily be forgotten while playing the original game. Consumables will help me discover several secrets with different suits, finally heal up to 100 HP with adrenaline shot, and for shot the final boss with BFG and quad damage. On the negative side of things, I really dislike the fact that closer to the end game, you meet more and more hard enemies with high amount of HP. I would prefer if there were monsters with new challenging movesets or different attack patterns of something of this kind. Instead, we have a damn bullet sponges who hit like a truck with simple attacks and just slows down the progress of the game. And you know, sometimes it feels really weird. We have this really hard 150 BPM metal music motivating you to kill thousands of monsters, but instead you hit the same enemy for 10 times in a row with the railgun, trying to align your shots with the beats to pretend it's a rhythm game just to justify it all. So, final thoughts. If you want to hear god tier music and slay some nasty monsters who used to be your squad mates, or you have nostalgia for the times when you played OG Quake 2 back in the days, you should definitely check out this re-release. If you don't have that nostalgia itch or boomer shooters aren't your thing, at least check out the soundtrack. I can 100% guarantee that your dream personal records would go through the roof. Thanks for watching and happy gaming. Click the like button if you liked the video, leave a comment in the comment section below, and please consider subscribing to this channel if you would like to see more videos like this one.